Welcome back to another episode with Fight Pass with Mitch, presented by Notorious Pulls Radio. And on this episode, we're going to be going over Merab Dvalishvili versus Petr Yan, March 11th in Las Vegas for a highly touted UFC Bantamweight matchup. These are the number 2 and the number 3 ranked bantamweights in the world, and they are going to be putting on a spectacular performance. The whole card in general is very nice. We're going to go into greater detail on this episode. So remember, if you are new to watching, please leave a like and subscribe on YouTube. And remember, you can follow us also via Instagram. So let's get into it. Merab Dvalishvili, the number 3rd ranked UFC bantamweight from Georgia. He's 15-4, and he's coming into this fight as the heavy underdog at a plus 210. He's on an 8-fight win streak. His opponent, the former UFC bantamweight champion, Petr Yan, is coming in as the heavy favorite at a minus 250 from Russia with a record of 16-4. As you know, Petr Yan is on a 2-fight losing streak. His last bout was against Sean O'Malley, where he lost by decision. He also, obviously, lost twice to the current bantamweight champion, Aljamain Sterling. He had a nice little pickup win in between his disqualification with Aljamain against Corey Sandhagen. Had a nice win against Jose Aldo, Uriah Faber, Jimmy Rivera, and John Dodson. Let me say this again. Merab Dvalishvili, this will be his first 5-round fight. He is an absolute powerhouse, the machine, the workhorse of the bantamweight division. He's almost like the dark horse of the bantamweight division. A lot of people do not want to fight him. He has an endless gas tank. He is a phenomenal grappler, a non-stop pressure wrestler. His striking has been coming along as his UFC career has been progressing. His last win was against Jose Aldo, the UFC Hall of Famer. He had a beautiful win against Marlon Moraes. He beat Cody Stanman, John Dodson. As you know, Merab didn't have always this much success. His entry into the UFC, he actually went on a 2-fight losing streak. Then when he was able to turn it around, currently he's on an 8-fight win streak. This will be the main event. This will be a huge upcoming in support from his country, Georgia, where 3.7 million Georgians are going to be awaiting his victory. As you know, Merab trains with the current champion, Aljamain Sterling. So it's going to be interesting to see after this match what's going to happen. As you all know, Aljamain is going to be fighting Henry Cejudo for the title on May 6th. So the bantamweight division is by far, I can say, one of the most exciting divisions currently right now in the UFC, and I'm so happy that these two are getting the main event slot and fighting this Saturday night. The co-main event is also a very interesting fight. You have two Eastern European giants. Yes, I repeat, heavyweight giants for Eastern Europe. Let me get into stats. We have Alexander Drago Volkov, 35-10, 6'7", and he's the underdog at plus 140, which is very surprising. As you know, if you know Volkov, he's a huge UFC veteran, former Bellator heavyweight champion. He's already has 13 fights in the UFC, has his recent win over Warizno Rosenstruck. He lost to the highly skilled heavyweight who's currently injured and recovering, Tom Aspinall. He had a nice win over Marcin Tybura. He lost to Cyril Gane. He had a win over Alistair Overeem. He has a win over Walt Harris. And he has a loss to Curtis Blades. And you obviously know that infamous knockout of Derek Lewis, what he did to him in the final round in the 3rd, when Derek Lewis said his balls were hot, so he had to knock out Drogo.
My balls was hot.
His opponent, obviously no slouch, 6'2", Alexander Romanov, nicknamed King Kong. He's 16-1. He's from Moldova. He is an Olympic freestyle wrestler. His last loss, to me, was a little bit controversial, but he lost to Marcin Tybura. Otherwise, he's been on a 5-fight winning streak in the UFC. He was currently undefeated until his last loss in Utah, on the same card where Kamaru Usman got knocked out by Leon Edwards, if you guys remember. These heavyweights are no joke. Romanov is coming in as the favorite, and it's for a big reason. The matchmakers understand that Alexander Volkov, the key for him to winning this fight is using his push kicks, to keeping the distance and to keep this match away from the ground. As you know, Romanov is a very skilled wrestler. I don't see him having too many issues bringing Volkov down to the ground, submitting him or ground and pound. He has a lot of wins via submission. He is a very powerful fighter, and he's very resilient. I do understand why he's the favorite, and I do understand why I would have to choose him to win the victory for Saturday night. Wrestlers always give strikers a problem. If you cannot mitigate the wrestling or you're not prepared to take the fight in MMA to the ground, most likely the fight is not going to be yours at the end of the night. Romanov is a more complete fighter, even though Alexander Volkov has tons of experience in the UFC. I would never write off Volkov, but when it comes to a wrestler versus a striker in MMA, I'm always going to have to give the wrestler the knock. So in this case, guys, be really excited. It's the co-main event Saturday night, and these two giants are really going to square off, and it's going to be really exciting to see. The next fight was a postponed fight that should have been a main event 2 weeks ago, and that's Nikita Krylov versus Ryan Spann. As you know, Nikita Krylov he made weight, but there was some medical complications which caused him to withdraw from his bout. He's 29-9, and he's the favorite at -170. His last few wins were against Volkan Ozdemir. He had a win over Alexander Gustafsson. He lost to Paul Craig. He had a loss to Magomedov Ankalaev, and he beat Johnny Walker. His opponent, obviously you know, no slouch, Ryan Spann, 21-7, and he's the underdog at a +145. To keep it clear, this fight is at a catch weight. Both these gentlemen usually fight at light heavyweight, so I'm assuming the bout is going to be around 210, 215. As you know, Ryan Spann had a beautiful knockout victory in Madison Square Garden over Dominic Reyes. He had a win against Ian Kudalaba. He lost to Anthony Smith. He had a win against Misha Serkinov, and he lost to Johnny Walker. His journey also wasn't so easy getting into the UFC. In 2017, he lost his debut in Dana White's Contender Series to Carl Robinson, who's a current UFC rostered fighter. He later went on to LFA and became the champ at light heavyweight. And in 2018, he had a beautiful win on the Dana White's Contender Series where he earned himself a UFC contract. These two guys are very experienced, and this is going to be a really, really skilled match. As you know, what makes this card so exciting, this was a previous main event 2 weeks ago that should have been aired, and now it just got onto the main event slot. Just to show you the caliber of skill and importance some of these fights are that are going to be on the main event. I'm going to have to rock with Nikita Krylov for the experience and versus his resilience and his resume that he's currently assembled over his UFC career. I love Ryan Spann, and I'm going to be really excited, but I'm going to have to be rocking with Krylov. The next fight is a featherweight match that you might want to really tune into. You have UFC veteran Ricardo Ramos, 16-4, and he's coming in as an extreme favorite at a -350. He had a beautiful win against Chavez with a spinning back elbow. He's been in the UFC since 2017, and he's accumulated 10 fights with the organization. He lost to obviously a good friend of Khabib's, Zubra Tuhagov, who recently got cut by the UFC for a lack of performance issues in the octagon. He had a beautiful win against Bill Algeo, and he lost to Leron Murphy. Out of his 10 fights that he's accumulated with the roster, he's only lost 3. He's 7-3 under the UFC banner, which makes him a very, very dangerous featherweight coming into this competition. His opponent, Austin Lingo, 9-1, is the underdog at a +290. His UFC debut, he lost to Youssef Zalal, but he's picked up 2 nice wins over Jacob Kilburn and Luis Saldana. I understand why the UFC matchmakers are going with Ricardo. He's a very experienced featherweight coming into this fight. Austin Lingo, he's a good fighter. I like what I've seen from him. I just don't believe he's faced the caliber of talent that Ricardo Ramos has faced in his career. And therefore, with the lack of experience, I'm going to have to go with the heavy favorite from what I've seen on tape. Ricardo Ramos is going to get my nod for the night on Saturday. The next match, which in my opinion can also have been arguably a co-main event or even a main event slot on any other given night, and that's the really highly touted bantamweight, and that's Said Nurmagomedov. He's going against the other bantamweight star, Jonathan Martinez. Let's get in a little bit into Said Nurmagomedov. He's the heavy favorite at a -230. He's 17-2, and he's had 7 fights with the UFC since 2018. His last win was against Said Kakramanov, and it was with a ninja choke. And he was really, really challenged that fight. Anyone who watched that fight really showed, and he was really battle-tested. Kakramanov was on his ass that entire fight, and he was looking for the finish. Unfortunately, he fell a little short. He got caught in those lanky bantamweight arms, and he was submitted. He's also had a win against Douglas Silva, Cody Stamann by guillotine, Mark Striegel. He had his only loss in the UFC was to Raoni Barcelos. He actually beat the fighter that I mentioned, Ricardo Ramos, at bantamweight. So as you can see, this gentleman fluctuates between bantamweight and featherweight, and he also had a win against Justin Sluggins. His opponent, Jonathan Martinez, has also been in the UFC since 2018. These guys both entered since 2018. Martinez this will be his 11th UFC fight. He had a beautiful win against Cub Swanson. He's on a 4-fight winning streak, and he's 17-4, and he's the underdog at a +195. He beat Cub Swanson. He beat Vince Moraes. He beat Alejandro Perez. He beat Zviad Lashishvili. He had a knockout loss to Davy Grant, and he had a nice win against Thomas Almeida. He's very experienced. He's fighting out of Denver at a Factory X in Denver, Colorado. This is going to be a very, very skilled match. Even though Said Nurmagomedov is a ranked bantamweight and Martinez is not, I do believe on any other given night, given the competition that they will give Martinez, he can easily be a top 15 bantamweight in the current UFC roster. He is very skilled. He's always looking for the finish, and he has a big gas tank. I really am going to enjoy this fight. I do wish Said Nurmagomedov was fighting maybe a few ranks below him, which is like someone in the top 10, so we could really get him closer to possibly a title shot. But I do like how they're building his career low and slow and kind of building his name. Don't want to like burn him out too fast in the UFC, and I'm really excited to have him back Saturday night. He's been really good, and he's been very active. The opening match in the UFC main event is very interesting. It's a UFC debut for one of the gentlemen. His name is Vitor Petrino. He's 7-0, and he's an undefeated fighter. I love undefeated fighters, and I love especially when they make their UFC debut. His original bout that was scheduled, his opponent actually withdrew. So now this will be his UFC debut. He had a beautiful finish on the Contender Series. His opponent is Anton Turkalj, who's 8-1. And the Dana White's Contender Series debut was okay. He earned the contract. He had a nice win fight, but he went against the highly big superstar in Yaltin Almeida, and it was finished in the first round. I'm not sure how I feel about this fight. I do like both of these light heavyweights. They're exciting. I don't have too much information on their styles, but from what I've seen in the Contender Series, they're both game. I love UFC debuts, and I love someone who's going to give a chance to someone making their UFC debut. So this match, guys, I'm just going to give it to the favorite, to Vitor Petrino. He's 7-0. I really like what I've seen on his debut. He's an undefeated fighter, very fast, and I do believe it's going to be really exciting. Remember, if you like our content, leave a like and subscribe. Remember, we have some of the best merch on notoriouspulls.com. Enjoy Saturday night. This is going to be a big fight for Merab. We're going to be supporting him, and this is a big fight for the country of Georgia. We'll see you soon. Your host, Mitch.